How's we doing? Today is the day, ladies and gentlemen. Kind of legitimate, real NBA basketball. Summer League, they're wearing the right jerseys, and it looks like it, but it doesn't really look like it once they start playing. But today, actually getting into the nitty-gritty, one solid game. My original plan for today was to make it through another divisional preview. Again, you searched my Twitter not long ago. I listed the four we've done already. We've got two left. I was hoping to get through one today, one tomorrow, before preseason really gets going in earnest on Sunday when we have 4 games. We just have the 1 game tonight. Am I cold? It is actually really cold in my office. And by office, I mean basement. The all homes are like this to a certain degree, but thermodynamics, heat rises. And in my house at any given time, the basement, which is what someone would appropriately call my office, is about 10 degrees under what you want it to be. The middle floor is about the degree you want, and you sleep upstairs, which is like a hammam sweat bath. So it's 60 down here, 70 on the ground floor, and 80 upstairs, which is woeful, and I should really get someone to like check the vents or something. But yeah, that is why I am suchly bundled up in such a way. So but yeah, a little bit chilly. Thanks for asking. So the hat came on, plus representing the fam vice in exile, so to speak. YouTube link, you can pull it out of my Twitter, but if it isn't immediately obvious, send me a tweet at FastEddieFear.com. Once I hop off after the show, I will send you the link to the playlist. But there's a playlist on YouTube right now that has 4 60 to 90 minute videos of me breaking down thus far 20 of the 30 teams in the NBA. We're going to get through a couple right now. My original plan was to try to go a little fast and get the whole thing done and get out of here about 50 minutes from now, because they're going to get back to baseball. We only have the one streaming channel for the YouTube. That's you guys. Sorry, not you guys. You're on my personal Periscope. But right now, in a couple of weeks, you're going to have hockey going, basketball going, playoff baseball, NASCAR, golf, NFL, Thursday, Sunday, Monday. So it gets a little congested there. So we got to be off a little bit today. We're going to be back today to take yet another look at the Showdown slate tonight, analyze any news that comes out in the 2 hours interim between this show and that one. Baseball gets going at about 7:05. As soon as they clear the studio, so to speak, I will get back on air, hopefully again on both of these mediums, and discuss that slate for another 20 minutes or so. Then tomorrow during the day, the schedule is largely open, so I will analyze the final 2 or 3 games, 2 or 3 teams rather, of the Southeast, go through the final division we haven't touched yet, which is the Central Division, record those both to the playlist, and then there is a slate tomorrow night that we will get into. I think that's a 7 o'clock 2-game slate. We'll set aside some time to do that as well. And that'll work fine, because that is still getting all the information out before any of the teams have a game. None of the Central Division teams play until Sunday, I think. And there is one Southeast team that goes today, so we'll make sure within the first couple games to actually get to Charlotte, because they're playing tonight. So we can discuss them in length a bit, and then starting around 3:30, we will transition into talking about the 1-game slates tonight on Draftkings and FanDuel, which I haven't had a lot of time to personally go into the pricing, but we can do that together. It'll be an interactive size experience. So again, just in case you haven't seen any of the other previews, the most important 30 seconds to say is regular season DFS and preseason DFS are very, very different in a lot of ways. One of which is where I'd like to think during regular season DFS, whatever group I'm working with is more successful than the field at large. In preseason, it tends to be much more successful, so much so that I don't mind people spending large amounts of their bankroll. There's a number of reasons for this, but basically the number one is that minutes, which are an incredible predictor of production in the NBA, are kind of useless during the regular season. By useless, I mean everybody knows everything about them. It's really not hard to do the math that a guy plays this many minutes, scores this many points per minute, so you have to use process and being contrarian and various other things to try to find some sort of edge. In the preseason, it's the exact opposite. Very few people know how many minutes people are going to play, including me. I know more than most people. There's a couple situations where I'm still throwing up my hands and going, I'm not really sure what this coach is going to do yet, but that information is much harder to come by. You have to follow beat reporters. You have to talk to people you know sometimes. If you have sources, you have to really, really be diligent in finding out who's going to do what. And then not only is it that the information isn't out there, it also isn't easily amortized and aggregated in one place so that people can follow it. So during the regular season, you can make a just fine cashy lineup But everyone basically has that information. During the regular season, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80% of the people are just playing shit plays. They spend the same amount of money on a guy who's going to play 18 minutes, whereas if you're paying attention, you can pick all guys who are going to play 26 minutes or 28 minutes. And when your guys play 50% extra minutes, you just win without having to necessarily add anything much beyond that. So during the regular season, of course, minutes still super important. But during the preseason, it of and by itself actually provides enough edge to be successful. And again, we've got a lot of sample size of 50 days over the last few years to prove this up. So also for today and going forward, had a lot of questions about content. When I get off here, I'm going to get back to working on my cheat sheet, figure out exactly how to upload that. There's a WordPress thing. There's technological issues here. But let me know what you want. If you're a subscriber, yes, if you're paying, your voice is going to carry more weight. But if I'm doing something that you think is useful and I'm not doing it enough, tell me. If I'm doing something you don't think is useful and I'm doing it too much, tell me. Beyond the obvious tweets of, hey, shut the fuck up about your knit cap and the air conditioning in your house. I don't care about that. Beyond that, if you have, comments about content, help me do what's best for you to get you there. So we will get started because we are dealing with some limited time here. Let's, I don't know, we'll go ahead and take it alphabetical. We'll go with the Atlanta Hawks to start with here. They're going to be bad. They are seemingly the odds-on favorite to be the worst team in the NBA this year. I almost like an underbet with this team. A lot of things can go bad. The record last year was 24-58, managing to come in worst in the Eastern Conference, which really was winning for them, is what you have to look at it as. There were 5 teams tanking their ass off at the end of the year there. 5 teams ending in the 20s in wins. But they got to the low end of 24-58. The projected Vegas record this year, again, 24-58. I don't think it happens. They're going to have issues on both ends of the court, but they are, for a couple of reasons, a team that I'm excited about, both regular season and preseason, who I'm definitely going to want to take some pieces of. So let's talk about them for a while. They really remade a lot of the roster. You look at each team, we're going to talk about who stayed, who left, and who arrived. Usually you end up with, counting training camp deals, you end up with 8, 10 players staying in, 5 out, 8 in, 7 out, 6 in, 7, 8 for most teams. Just looking at summertime here, you had 13 new players in for the Hawks and 10 players out. So they did a lot as opposed to teams like, the Celtics, who had like 4 and 4. Which, again, made sense for both teams, because if you were the Hawks, you needed to change some shit. And if you were the Celtics, you needed to have your guys stop getting hurt, because you pretty much had everything else you need. So, carryovers from last year: Kent Bazemore, DeAndre Bembry, John Collins, Dwayne the Deadman, Tyler Dorsey, Miles Plumlee is still there, and Taurean Prince remains. New additions: Jalen Adams, who I believe is a guy who wasn't drafted but got signed post the draft and is in on the training camp deal. Cole Aldrich in from Minnesota. He's probably not going to get a ton of time. Justin Anderson in from Philadelphia, and with some, he won't be playing right at the start there, and that's something we'll talk about again in a bit, but has some familiarity with Lloyd, who is an assistant with the 76ers for a number of years. That's from whence he comes. We'll get to the coaches in a second. But Vince Carter continuing his tour. 1 player left in the NBA older than I am. Keep going, Vince. You're making me feel good. Daniel Hamilton, also injured, but Summer League All-Star. Put up some near triple-doubles for us. Made us some money there. Kevin Huerter, RJ Hunter, Alex Len in from Phoenix, Jeremy Lin in from Brooklyn. We're going to talk about him. He's going to do some interesting things. Alex Poitras had a couple good games, Summer League for Indiana. Thomas Robinson back in the league after a year. China, I want to say. Out of the country. Amari Spellman, and of course, their draft pick stud, who is going to be a guy we'll have a lot of interest in this year. Trae Young, they lost a lot of guys. I will read the ones of reference. Tyler Kavanaugh, sure, we'll go with you being of use. Mike Muscala found his way to Philadelphia. Dennis Schroeder, of course, found his way to Oklahoma City, which, you have to wonder if he's silently pumping the fist every time Russell Westbrook is like, oh, by the way, I had another knee surgery. It's not a big deal. I know it's like 4 in the last 2 years, but I'm going to be fine. Isaiah Taylor, who had some good games for us last year, I think. T-Rob was EuroLeague. There you go. Thanks. And Isaiah Taylor, who, again, was one of a number of guards who put together interesting seasons for us last year with this team. We had Tyler Dorsey days. We had Isaiah Taylor days. This was definitely a bit of a cluster. Did Eddie get a bad haircut? Eddie, you can't get a bad haircut with my hair. I was just a little bit chilly, but I got a haircut, to be sure. 17 wins for your Hawks. Like, if I'm betting this team, I'm betting the under. Like, again, I'm not a real sports bettor, but I've mentioned this before. If you look at the over-unders projected for a lot of teams, tons of them are in the 30s or high 20s or 30s, and teams are not going to end in the 30s in the modern NBA because they're either going to get past that or they're going to tank. So if you look at last year, in the Eastern Conference, we had, I think, 5 teams end in the 20s. In the Western Conference, we had, I think, 6. And in the Western Conference, we had 1 team end in the 30s, I think. Just the Mavs. And they're an oddity because they don't just go full tank and rebuild. And they're known for that. We're like, no, we're not going to just shut it down and tank it. We're going to keep kind of grinding along and work our G League team and try to make some trades to get guys like Doncic. But I think you can make some sort of extrapolative argument that if everybody is going to continue to do the tanks, and we expect this team to be bad, they got to be the worst of the bad. So if I think there's going to be 4 teams in the Eastern Conference tanking, and it probably won't be as many this year because, like, Cleveland's going to try to compete and probably not make it to the playoffs. And so other teams are going to be hunting for that spot. Detroit, Charlotte. So I think maybe you only have, like, 4 teams tanking this year. But if you got 4 teams tanking, they started a little bit earlier. Now you're looking at maybe the Hawks need to be even worse to lose or win is really is the case with them. So, yeah, maybe they do get 17 wins. But the Roto Grinders gang is here. What are you doing here? You should be at Roto Grinders. You and I disagree on a lot of team total prop bets this season. Send me a tweet about it. I'd love to have a dialogue about it. So yeah, coach this year, Lloyd Pierce. First year as a head coach anywhere, but had assistant stomps with 4 teams previously: the Cavs, the Warriors, the Grizzlies, and most recently, I think 5 years with the 76ers, where he was both well known for being a guy who had a lot of skills in player development, working with the younger players, and also their defensive guru, which is one of the reasons he picked up this job. Obviously, the player development fits like a glove here. A lot of guys on this Atlanta team who are young with potential. They really want to see what they can get out of guys like, obviously, Trae Young and John Collins and Taurean Prince, who still isn't that old. And they have a lot of guys who can pick up a ceiling here. The defensive guru bit is going to be a little bit frustrating for him. If he's been used to having, you know, elite athletes and premier NBA players who he could mold into a defensive unit that would do his bidding, he's going to have a couple minutes this year where he's going to punch through a couple of clipboards. Your expected starters this year is going to be, I think Trae Young starts at point guard. Now, there has, in theory, that's an open competition, they've said, but it would be strange to put Jeremy Lin out there. Would be the only other guy really competing for that job. We'll come back to that. So Trae Young, Kent Bazemore, Taurean Prince, John Collins, Dwayne Dedmon. Prince is going to start. Collins is going to start. Those 2 things are going to happen. Dedmon, we don't know as far as his health is going to go. We'll come back to that in a second. Trae Young, I think, beats Jeremy Lin out for the job, but Jeremy Lin is a perfectly functional basketball player from a fantasy sense and is going to play some backup 1 and some backup 2. Trae Young has said they told him he's going to spend some time next to Jeremy Lin and vice versa, and the coaches said that. So, yeah, I think Young gets the start next to Bazemore. But Lin backs up both those positions, and you still end up seeing, I'll guess, like 28, 30 minutes a game regular season out of Trae Young, and you're still getting mid-20s in minutes for Jeremy Lin as long as he's healthy. But, again, this is a full development team. You want to put Trae Young on the court with at least Taurean Prince and John Collins as much as you can. I think they all start. I'll be surprised if they give the job to Jeremy Lin out of the gates. But in theory, coach's words, as of the moment, I believe it's still an open competition between those 2. Kent Bazemore will get the start at the 2, but again, he's one of the few guys left with a somewhat onerous contract on this team. There's a lot of rumors that he is going to get traded during the year, and he's the most logical trade piece on the team by far. So, that would open up a couple things. But so yeah, injuries. Jeremy Lin is healthy, but that's changes with the weather, so we have some concern there. Daniel Hamilton, who again we discussed, who played with the Thunder in the Summer League and has been really a force in the G League, isn't healthy. Isn't going to be ready till close to the beginning of the regular season. I think, somewhere between 10-15 days. I would have to check that, but he's going to be ready for the first couple preseason games, which is a shame because that would have really been his only shot to get minutes on this team, but maybe falls into something if Lin gets hurt and or Bazemore gets traded. Justin Anderson, unfortunately, has a bad left shin. that's going to keep him out for a while. And he had a pretty good chance, and probably still would be the front runner to when the regular season opens, to be the backup 3 for this team behind Taurean Prince. He does have a rapport with Lloyd Pierce from their time together in Philadelphia. Amari Spellman is going to miss a couple of weeks. And that's, again, a guy who we think could have gotten some time here. There's not a lot of bigs on this team we're super happy about, and to that end, Dwayne Dedmon is still going to miss a few more weeks. They had originally prognosticated that he was going to be available even at the beginning of training camp, but he had an ankle avulsion / break. I think it was one of those ligament breaks where it chips off a piece of the bone compared to whatever, which apparently isn't the worst thing in the world, and he's out of his walking boot, but he's still not ready to go. And the relevance of all of this is, all told, a significant chunk of the Hawks training camp roster of 20 isn't actually going to be able to play. Every team has a 20-man training camp roster, which they then have to cut down as you get towards the regular season. But that gives me some appeal for this team. They're going to play fairly fast. They're going to want to play their kids a fair amount anyway. And I think we're going to be able to rely on Trae Young, Taurean Prince, John Collins to see a lot of time. Now, that's not necessary. They don't have to, but it's a little less likely to have full-blown minutes fuckery when you have 15 or 16 healthy guys, which is what they're going to have, as opposed to most teams, which will have 18, 19, or 20. Like, you're going to see some ridiculous shit with the Celtics tonight. I'll go ahead and say the Celtics, I'll put the over-under on the number of players in this game at 17.5. And Brad Stevens has already come out and said no one's going to play more than 20 minutes. And if you caught the Atlantic Division preview, which we just did, this was all expected for quite some time. Atlanta takes the division. No. Don't get me wrong. It's not a good division. But no. I guess I'd have to say the Heat. I have to go with the Heat. Butler or de-Butlered. I'll go with Miami to take this division. A couple other vague insights on this team. Taurean Prince was incredible, especially the second half of the year last year, where just his usage went up. They took the handcuffs off. Was just doing a ton of everything at the end of last year, and showed that he could really carry the team to a certain extent. Had some monster games, which went against the 76ers, but just a guy we're really excited about. Trae Young himself, again, is going to be a really solid source of assists. The shot is still suspect. Defensively, there's some issues. Like when you talk about putting, Trae Young out there next to Jeremy Lin, I have concerns with the efficiency of this unit. So, John Collins, who I guess I really haven't spoken about enough, is raw but incredibly talented. Similar situation to, say, Jared Allen of Brooklyn, someone who I think we all expect to see more minutes this year, and the coaches have spoken about making their development more of a priority. So, Collins is going to start at the 4, maybe get some time at the 5 in the pre or the regular season, especially with Dedmon not in camp. So, but a real guy who we can expect to do some real damage there. So, again, trying to make haste because a lot to talk about today, so I'm not going to dwell on previous year's preseason history, which is something I usually do. Again, these are Budenholzer's usages, which I don't consider especially relevant for what we're talking about here, especially with the massive amount of turnover with the team. I don't think we can draw a lot there, and I certainly hope Lloyd steps it up a bit, but with the injuries at hand that we've previously referred to, it makes sense that this is a team we're going to be interested in. And again, when we're talking about whether to play these guys in preseason, everything in salary cap formats is price dependent. Although sometimes in Showdown slates it's not. Believe it or not, sometimes in Showdown slates it's just a pick'em, where it's like, these are the 6 guys I think will score the most points, and I don't spend the whole cap. But most of the time the cap is still going to end up being relevant. And so when you look at, and we'll talk about this more in a bit, when you look at the Celtics and the Hornets tonight, there's nothing good about the Celtics, whether or not you're talking about the pace, whether or not you're talking about the number of expected minutes, whether or not you're talking about their price relative to how well they did last year. Whereas I've seen signs that Draftkings has done a little better job not just signing up for algorithm bullshit and actually molding them a little bit by hand. Most of the prices on most of the players on most of the teams are derived from some sort of previous usage if they played last year. Well, you'll get a huge amount of variation based on that. When you talk about a team with the Hawks, where all the carrying over players we expect to be better than they were last year, John Collins, for example, just by virtue of getting more minutes and being in and having a little more usage to go around depending on who they play at backup center, versus, say, the Celtics, where, excepting Gordon Hayward and Kyrie Irving, every player on that team is probably worse this year. Like, if you look at the stats of every player on the Celtics, not named one of those two guys, they're probably worse, because everyone loses usage and everyone loses time. I mean, you can make an argument like, Tatum was amazing as a rookie. He's going to improve in his second year and be more efficient, and that somehow overcomes that. I don't know. It would not surprise me if literally every player on that team was worse than they were last year, excepting the two guys coming back from massive injury. Are we looking at tonight's slate? Yes, we're almost there. God, see, that's the thing. I feel like I'm burning through this, and that was still like 20 minutes. Let's move on and talk about Charlotte, and then we're going to go from Charlotte and until they kick me off the air around 55 past. We will talk about tonight's slate more specifically. So, Charlotte Hornets, 36-46 last year. Didn't make the playoffs even in the East. That won't quite get you there. I think they weren't ninth. No, they were 10th. They were 10th in the East last year. Their projected Vegas record is exactly the same, 36-46, which makes sense to some extent. There were not a lot of changes in this team. They didn't do a lot of in and out. Carryovers of Dwayne Bacon, Nick Batum, Sweet Dick Willie, Hernan Gomez, Frank Kaminsky, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Jeremy Lamb, Malik Monk, Kemba Walker, Marvin Williams, and Cody Zeller. New additions of Bismack Biyombo, who is returning. Actually, another guy going home, if you will. Miles Bridges out of the draft, Devontae Graham, J.P. Makura, who we tried to use a few times in Summer League and had some almost Bismack Biyombo level usage, as in, is he out there? Is he doing anything? And Tony Parker, of course, coming in to grab himself some backup minutes in from the Spurs. They lost Michael Carter-Williams, who's going to play a couple positions for the Rockets. Dwight Howard, who makes the short trip through the Mid-Atlantic region to the Wizards. Julian Stone, Mangok Miatang, a couple guys who, totally said that name wrong, but guys who are not going to be terribly relevant. So, coach, first year, James Borrego, his first year as a head coach, has been an assistant for about 15 years in the NBA. Including 2 different stints with the Spurs. Was the interim head coach for, I think, 30 years. Was the interim head coach with the Orlando Magic for, I believe it was 30 games, where he went 10-20. But at this point becomes the first Latino head coach in league history, along with Igor out in Phoenix. Was the first foreign-born and raised head coach in NBA history. Again, I think these are both wonderful things for apparently most of you. It is, they took our jibs. Anyhow, expected starters, again, they have confirmed for tonight, which is always nice when they do this. The starters will be Walker, Lamb, Batum, Marvin Williams, and Cody Zeller will start tonight. I do think that is the most likely starting lineup come opening day, since they're starting with it. The most likely of those to change would be Cody Zeller. Besides the fact that Cody likes to get himself hurt, played 33 games last year. And there's a couple other reasonable guys to put out there. Now there's the other two. Sorry, mind blank there. Sweet Dick Willie, Hernan Gomez, who I originally thought might get the job because I thought he fit the style that James Borrego is advocating a little bit better than Cody Zeller. And Bismack Biyombo is there as well. Biyombo, I think, is the most unlikely to do it. He's been a backup for a long time at this point, although so have all 3 centers. But there was a point in which he actually had the lowest usage in the NBA a few years ago. It's just not a guy who gets involved on offense, and Borrego's press conferences and everything he says and the way he's conducting his practices all indicate that he's going to run this team a lot faster. Interestingly enough, we've talked about 2 teams so far. Both of them have anecdotes out there of running practices and scrimmages with a decreased shot clock, which isn't that weird. A lot of teams do it, but guys are talking about, I think Malik Monk gave the interview and where he said they're running their scrimmages with a 12-second shot clock. They're trying to pick up the pace. Now, this isn't Suns 8 seconds and less shit, but still going to be better than, say, Clifford's offense last year, who we'll get to whenever we get to the Florida teams. Which is definitely a little bit more deliberate. So in general, yes, I do think this portends better things for these guys in fantasy in general. The pace should come up a little bit. So Yeah, if Cody Zeller stays healthy, I think at this point you have to take him as the most likely guy to keep that opening day job. And he rim runs very well for a big guy. So he's not that bad. He's not as offensively refined as Willy Hernangomez, but he's not as bad on defense either, which is a real issue with Willy. So anyhow, for the moment, Cody Zeller gets the start. Marvin Williams is going to be at the 4. Only comments I've seen about him is James Brago advocating that he try to shoot more three-pointers. And again, this is, your common modern-day analytics, but they're trying to increase their ratio of three-pointers to two-pointers, which most times, 9 times out of 10, is the correct thing to do. There are interesting scenarios. There were interviews recently with a couple coaches. David Fizdale was talking about it and got a lot of pushback from people on Twitter where he was saying, no, I think he was talking about Trey Burke needs to be able to make these long contested twos. And people are like, oh my God, he's not Byron Scott, who literally was intentionally saying, I don't want to take too many of them three-pointers, okay? He was just bad at coaching and apparently basic math. It's more a situation where you need the personnel to be able to execute these plans. So, yes, of course, you want every shot to be a layup, a bank shot, or a three-pointer. That is mathematically the correct distribution. Those possessions yield the most points per possession. But not every team has the personnel to get those shots. So there is a mathematical fulcrum point you would look at where you need to understand where, okay, there's 7 seconds left on the shot clock. I now have the option to do something and break my man down and get a somewhat contested 21-footer, or jack up some horrific three-pointer or an out-of-control layup. So there is some fulcrum point in which it becomes more wise to seek out those shots, especially because as modern analytics and Morey and everything becomes more accepted in the NBA, more defenses are structured specifically to limit those things, where they're all about rim protection and line protection. That creates soft spots 16, 18 feet out where you can get open shots, and frequently you'll be in situations where those are the shots you need to take. So it's not as simple as I see a lot of people yelling on Twitter, what are you doing? You can't ever take that shot. So Heat over under 50 wins. I'd say under. I think I have him at 48.5, but that's a good question. So other guys on this team, Batum moving from the 2 back to the 3. He was always a natural 3. You like that for him generally. Besides him being more comfortable there, rebounds will pick up a little bit. He's always been a guy with some multi-stat upside. He's a guy who can get a triple-double. He's one of the few guys playing in the NBA who has a 5x5 stat line, which just about my favorite thing in the world. I'm physically excited talking about it. Jeremy Lamb is going to be a popular play tonight. He moves into the starting lineup. Very good rebounder for a guard. Those of you who've played DFS for a while will remember Jeremy Lamb's frequent 14-17 rebound games where you were like, yes, obviously that was going to happen. But just understand that he's now spending more time next to Batum and Walker and potentially Willie, and Marvin is trying to take more three-pointers, so he is, on a good day, the number 3 name on offense now. We don't know how the minutes are going to split between him and Malik Monk, so going to be very popular. I would probably want some, but undershoot the field in general. We'll get to that. I said there's a lot of questions piling up. I do want to get to all of them. Did you just say Sweet Dick Hernangomez? Yeah, it's Watch Do the Right Thing or sometime. There's a character there named Sweet Dick Willie. So I believe the first Sweet Dick Willie to whom I frequently referred in DFS chats was Brewers pitcher Willie Peralta, if I'm getting that right. And as such, it has been moved on as the nom de guerre for any Willies playing in just about any sport. It worked especially well last year when the New York Knicks had 3 centers, all of whom had some sort of penile phallic nickname, in which you had Enes Kanter, Sweet Dick Willie Hernangomez, and Kyle O'Quinn, affectionately known as the Cock. So collectively, I think that made the Sweet Dick apply more. So there's your question. But no, I'm not doing your questions till we're done. 4:33. So we'll talk about these guys a little bit more. Talk about the game, and then I'll handle as many questions as I can before I must give way to that good night. Yeah, so you do like Kemba Walker more in this system. I do think his usage nominally improves this year. Now, you can certainly make an argument that taking Michael Kidd-Gilchrist likely out of the starting lineup portends poorly for him because that was one guy who generally wasn't taking a lot of shots unless the ball came from Kemba. But I do think Kemba does pick up some assists as well. Moving from the 2 to 3 is going to limit the number of assists that Batum picks up, which was always a pretty significant number. And the number of times Batum brings the ball up the court. And Jeremy Lamb, not a big assist guy. So let's talk about injuries for a second. Notable injuries entering the season. None really. Malik Monk and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist are probable for tonight's game. Malik Monk has a pelvis bruise. I've had pelvis bruises in my life, and they all have good stories there. And Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, again, moving sort of more from a 3 to a backup 4. I think he'll play both positions, and I think they'll run small a little more, so 3-4 is sort of an irrelevant distinction at this point. And Devontae Graham had a leg issue, but I think he's entirely over that. So other guys on this team worth discussing. Yeah, Makura is at best a third-string guy. Tony Parker should be basically the strict backup there for Kemba Walker. Other guys I have relevant notes on I want to point out here. Yeah, power forward is a bit of a morass. Pelvic thrusts, like the time warp, I don't know. But a lot of guys, you know, conceivably playing at the 4 and the 5 here. Again, we mentioned we have Biyombo, Willie, and Zeller, of course. And then at the 4, you have in theory now Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, and Frank Kaminsky is still around. And we already talked about Marvin Williams, and Miles Bridges out of the draft is a guy they really like, who they seem to be thinking is better at the 4 than the 3. So you're right, Bridges you just mentioned. He is a guy who's going to get some time tonight. And again, we'll go together. Let us go then, you and I, and we'll take a look at some prices and see how where these guys are priced up. I'm going to be back on the air in 2.5 hours, by which time hopefully I'll have figured out how to create color code and upload my cheat sheet for the premium subscribers at awesemo.com, where my goal is to somehow give you a list of favorite picks, how many minutes and how many points I expect guys to score during the preseason. I moved away from optimal lineups to that for Summer League, which makes me feel better because one lineup of 8 dudes is a really annoying approximation and limiting down of a lot of information, and appeared to work very well. So I'm going to try to do something similar to what we did during Summer League for those of you who are familiar with that. But I have to first compose it because I've been spending all my time on these videos, and then secondarily figure out how to upload it. And, you know, math is hard and I'm just a girl. So, which that reference someone asked me the last time I said it was, there was a Barbie doll that was released in the 70s or 80s, and when all things were wonderful and sexist, and if you pulled the string, one of the things it said was, math is hard and I'm just a girl, which adorable. So yeah, all right, let's talk about tonight's game a little bit here. So heuristically, standing back for a second, there is no way in which I like the Celtics more than Charlotte tonight. I would bet fairly significantly the winning lineup will have. And now this is dependent on pricing. If the cap is loose enough, if they fuck up the pricing enough that it's close to a pick'em, this is little. But if the pricing is at all what I expect it to be, and we're going to take a look at this in a second, I would expect Charlotte to be much, much better as plays than Boston for a couple of reasons. Number of reasons. Again, the first most obvious reason, Brad Stevens said, I don't think anybody plays over 20 minutes tonight. And again, I will load up my Atlantic Division preview, which is in here somewhere. But I spent quite some time talking about the fact that I expected the Celtics minutes to be shit during the preseason. You know, last season they had Tatum lead the way with 25.1 minutes. The year before that, Jaylen Brown led the way, both when they were rookies, with 23.3 minutes. But for example, if you look at the year before last, which is the year I think this will most closely resemble, Jaylen Brown had 23.3, Avery Bradley had 21.3, Marcus Smart had 20.4, and I shit you not, the fourth most high had 17.9. They had only 3 players exceed 18 minutes per game in the preseason. Like, your average Summer League team has 5 guys at like 25, 24, 23 and a half, 23, 22. Some teams exceed that. Some teams exceed it with a couple guys where you get, you know, 2 guys get 28 and everyone else gets 20. It obviously depends on injuries and situational scarcity. But the Celtics were always a team we were going to be very, very careful of. So reason 1, I expect your average Hornet to play more minutes than your average Celtic. I'll rephrase that, because your average Hornet will in theory play exactly the same number of minutes as your average Celtics. I expect the Hornets to play a guy or two less. Hence, the average player who plays will play more minutes on average, and I expect the discrepancy in minutes between starters and third string to be greater on Charlotte than I do at the Celtics. The Celtics are literally going to run, Rob Williams out there for 18 minutes, and Kyrie Irving out there for 18 minutes, and Semi Ojeleye out there for 18 minutes, and Al Horford out there for 18 minutes. I think it's quite likely you get 25 minutes of Kemba Walker, or certainly off the bench 26 minutes of Malik Monk, or certainly starting 24 minutes of, you're going to have to do a lot of work to make me take many Celtics in this situation. I'm probably where there's 6 guys. I think FanDuel may only be 5. We'll look in a second. I'm going to be really inclined towards 4 and 2 or 5 and 1. Did I watch the Borrego shoot-around video? I have watched several Borrego videos, including some of shoot-around. I don't know which one you're specifically referring to. Ricky, feel free to clarify for me. All right, so thing number 1, yeah, I think guys on the Celtics are generally playing less. Thing number 2, single game showdown preseason cash normally isn't something I would want to do, but again, the world is filled with stupid people right now, and is going to be, especially for the next week. And preseason only goes, I think it ends on the 12th, so that's 14 or 15 days we get to milk this fucker. So at least the first half, people are just going to play stupid shit. So even cash makes sense to me if you can get into it. So, but especially in tournaments, Celtics are going to be higher owned. What percentage of the casual community was like, oh sweet, NBA's back, I wanted to watch that game, I like Boston. They can name 9 people on Boston, they can name 2 people on Charlotte. Okay, so, Cody Zeller is just going to be under-owned. He's starting, I looked at his price briefly before, it's like $4,000. That's pretty exciting. But yeah, reason number 2 is especially relevant to how good they are as plays. The Celtics are going to be over-owned relative to the Hornets. And thirdly, the pricing on the Celtics is fucked up. Primarily because, again, everyone on the team is worse this year. So with the exception of Kyrie to an extent and Gordon Hayward basically entirely, everyone on that team is priced based on a usage and minutes that really doesn't exist. Now, the minutes for everyone on the team is reduced, but everyone on that team had higher usage last year because you didn't have Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward taking up 53% of the usage on the team. So, to sum up, the Celtics generally are going to be overpriced, over-owned, and underproduce. That's not quite a combination. So, yes, for all those reasons, giving you the briefest, really wasn't that brave. I was watched the Senate hearings yesterday. I saw somebody tweet a widely celebrated tweet that said that that Dr. Ford was braver than any U.S. Marine. Maybe we can slow our roll a little bit. I'm just saying. Find to respect, find to believe. Find to like whoever you like between her and Kavanaugh, or think she's just mistaken and like them both, but braver than any Marine ever seemed like it was too strong of a take for me. It's possible to respect somebody without going complete hyperbolic ridiculous. The world is filled with stupid people right now, quote. Yeah, that honestly, if you said, why should we watch you during the preseason? Quite possibly that would be my number 1 answer. Nobody in the division has a shot at the finals. I mean, I really like Eric Spoelstra as a coach, and if you give me Jimmy Butler at no hard usage, I can conceive of universes in which they get over on Boston. But, yeah, I think the best 3 teams in the East are all in the Atlantic Division. I feel pretty strongly it's Boston, then Toronto, then Philadelphia. All right, so I'm going to burn through some of your questions, and then I'm going to load up these pages and just keep talking about stuff. It's the best time of the year for DFS. Almost every sport is in season. True. The Slack chat seems like one of the only perks so far. Yeah, I will say, again, I'm developing my offerings. I have only so much time, and I work another full-time job in addition to throwing dozens of hours at this every week. But again, I'm barring killing myself and never seeing my family, I'm willing to do just about anything. So if you're interested in subscribing and say, look, I'd like to subscribe, but what I'd like to see is this, go ahead and let me know. I'd like that kind of feedback. The Slack chat is amazing. I don't know how it compares ranked to other DFS Slack chats because I've never been a member of one. So if you said, oh, I'm on the RotoWire Slack chat and they're the best in the world, I suppose that's possible. All I can tell you is that by experience, for for the entertainment / camaraderie / fellowship value, it's great. I literally, and I, again, by law, I'm not allowed to play right now because I work in the DFS industry. That's my day job, so FanDuel and Draftkings will not allow me to participate, nor will my day job, which is great for you. It means that I'm paying attention right up to lock. I have no conflict of interest. I'm giving you everything I got, but, you know, hanging out with those guys was the best. Summer League, where we basically crushed it 15 days in a row, was the best. Watching guys win 6 figures once in a while last year is the absolute best in the world. In general, you have people looking at lineups and talking about lineups and posting stuff and posting news in there, which helps me incredibly because I'm just one guy for the preseason and one guy for the Summer League, and so that we don't miss anything, so that, God forbid, I miss something, which I try never to, but stuff does escape me. Someone always has my back there, and it just collectively makes the experience of playing DFS incredibly better, and they are building lineups and talking about prices and looking at sites and shit all day. So, yeah, if you told me, okay, you can subscribe, but you only either get the show no matter what. The show is free, as you all know. You're watching it. But you only either get the Slack chat or Ed's worksheet. I would take the Slack chat. Like, I like to think I know what I'm doing, but I'm a guy, and that's 200 guys or 500 guys or 1,000 guys. I don't know how many people are in NFL channel. So, Miles Bridges, how many minutes tonight? I think something like 16 to 18. He's not going to start, but he is going to get some significant back to time. I think he plays the 2 and the 3. I'd be surprised if he got 20, but I'd be surprised if he didn't get 15. I'm going to put out full minutes projections, which will be interesting because eventually the people who are watching the show but not subscribing will attempt to derive them one question at a time. That's always fun when that happens. So there's one other. Frank the Tank healthy? Yes, Frank the Tank is, to my knowledge, feeling all good in the neighborhood with what is going on with him. His last, trying to remember his last health issue when it came to last year. I know he isn't currently in my injured section of my database. Let me go take a look and see if I can. Wasn't it? Oh, I'm just gonna go back and look. But he's been healthy for quite some time. And they're expecting him to also conceivably play more center. Everything they're saying is about pace, and so Frank at the 5 is opposed to Frank at the 4. You're getting a faster team. So you're going to be looking at teams where you would previously have had, you know, MKG at 3 and Frank at the 4. Now you'll get MKG at the 4 and Frank at the 5. So I do think Frank is an interesting tournament play. So I'm going to start looking at your questions and load up this Draftkings thing, assuming it lets me. Make sure my VPN is off so it doesn't think I'm coming from Kiev. Somebody subbed up, haven't done that in a while. Thanks a lot. A lot of you guys are... I wouldn't do this if it wasn't for you guys. I could get paid the exact same thing, but if I didn't get to like hang out and chat, I absolutely wouldn't do it. It's absolutely not worth the time. Jackson on the Pels, autoplay all season and season once he gets acclimated. Frank Jackson? Yeah, I am bullish. I autoplay if he ends up in a significant role. Yes, I think he's incredibly talented. We saw some great things during the half of Summer League play. But there is some consternation there with various backup guys. You know, Jarrett Jack there is trying to get somewhere. Willie gonna eat. Willie's another guy I like. I do think he gets 20 minutes tonight, and there have been rumblings of him being next to Cody for a while. So figuring out what to do with the bigs there is going to be interesting. But again, these guys are cheap. I think I'm gonna find it and load it up in a second if I can here. Okay, I'm into the Kings of the Draft. But you had like Zeller at 4,200, which is really hard to get away from, and Frank at 5,800. Those are pretty interesting. What's your take on captain tonight? Yeah, let's get into that. I'm going to look at prices and see how much it affects. Do I think the Rockets can pull off the trade for Butler? I do think they have some of the assets. Their picks are worth less, but, you know, it would be some combination of like Eric Gordon and maybe some of the Suns assets. Like, I can see it happening, but I don't think they would be my favorite. Butler's not going anywhere. Butler's going to go somewhere. If the owner wants it, even if the coach doesn't, it's going to happen. Ricky's still waiting to hear. I'll watch the shooter on video and ask about Kemba's playing time. He'll probably play into the third quarter. The first half is probably going to be similar to the regular season rotations. See, that's what I'm saying. Now again, if I click over here to my Twitter
Windows warning alert, malicious pornographic spyware is square detected, error number 0xx90025E9. Please call us immediately at mention number. Do not ignore this critical alert. If you close this page, your computer access will be disabled to prevent further damage to our network. Your computer has alerted us that it has been infected with a pornographic spyware and and risk where the following information is being stolen: financial data, Facebook logins, credit card details, email account logins, photos stored on this computer. You must contact us immediately so that our expert engineers can walk you through the removal process over the phone to protect your identity. Please call us within the next 5 minutes to prevent your computer from being disabled or from any information loss. Call toll-free, mention number, Windows warning alert, malicious pornographic spyware, riskware detected, error number 0xx900.
Chrome reboot, so you will all hopefully pause just 1 minute as I take care of that. And then we will reload and go from the scratch with the Draftkings. And then look at FanDuel, where unsurprisingly they have less contests and less size on the contests than compared to Draftkings. All right, we have resolved that issue. Call the number. Yeah, this is so I have a brand new my gaming computer right here that I need to turn into my desktop computer at some point for, you know, the actuality of work, but I haven't done so yet because I have so much stuff loaded on this one. But I should really start using this for streaming and other things, and we would avoid that situation. But that was pretty funny. So we've got 10 minutes left. Let's head on over to Draftkings. We have, unless somehow Draftkings is sending me to Spybot places, which he's not on the slate. Who's not on the slate? All right, 2 hours, 39 minutes. All right, we're looking at Draftkings for the moment. Hacked! I knew exactly one time in history where one content site did DDoS another content site. It was pretty shameful. So I'm going to look at the utility pricing right out. Let's talk about some guys here and what we think about them. You have Kyrie on top at 10.6. Kemba Walker second at 10.2. Al Horford third at 9.4. Again, on Draftkings, if you don't know, they have a captain spot, which I like a little better than FanDuel, which doesn't have a pricing modifier. It's just scored the most points. So it's really just about picking that spot, whereas on DK there is a little more subtlety involved there. Guy costs 50% more, scores 50% more. Order of players here, and then we'll get back into specific prices. Kyrie, then Kemba, then Horford, then Hayward, then Batum, then Tatum, then Brown, then Smart. So, again, to reiterate, Borrego's saying that guys are going to play into the third quarter and have pretty similar first-half rotations to a regular season game. That means about 24 minutes for me for Kemba Walker. And again, you're going to be looking at a regular season game. He was tending to play 15 or 16 in the first half, and then he's going to get a third quarter shift. So maybe that gets shorted and he only plays 15 in the first half and 6 at the beginning of the second quarter, or at the beginning of the third quarter rather. You're looking at 21, 22 minutes for Kemba Walker. That seems a safe expectation, and you might hit 24, 25. Kyrie Irving, I think, is going to play 18 minutes. So do you like Kyrie? Yeah, Kyrie is a very good basketball player. This is not a fearsome defensive court here. He's had success against Kemba Walker individually in the past. I think Kyrie Irving quite possibly ends up on your ideal team because he's going to play 18 minutes and play and score, you know, hopefully 22, 24, 26 fantasy points. Really wouldn't surprise me as much. Looked good in the preseason most of the times I've seen him play. I'm a little disinclined towards Horford. Certainly not out of play by any means, but when you remove his ability to get a double-double or a triple-double or some of the bonus stats, you know, his downside comes a little bit, and Kyrie's function isn't so much out of that. But yeah, I would rather play Kemba Walker than Kyrie Irving. You ask me right now, how many minutes do those guys play? I'll say 16.5 for Kyrie and 22 for Kemba. I'll say $400 and play Kemba Walker, who also, by the way, may well be less the hell popular. But probably Kemba Walker is my #1 scoring player on this slate. Nick Batum is 8,400. Again, some loss with his inability to pick up a double-double or something in what we expect to be limited time. But again, we're talking about the starters here, or most of the starters we're expecting to see in the low 20s in minutes. You can kind of lock that in. So I don't think there's a starter I'm going to disagree with on price. So let's look at some specific numbers. Again, I'm just going to look at the utility pricing. I'm not going to multiply by the 50%. That would be if you put them in there at the captain. Kyrie at 10.6, Kemba at 10.2, Horford at 9.4, Hayward at 8.8, Batum at 8.4, Tatum at 8.2, Brown at 7.8, Marcus Smart, who is not going to play, he has a personal issue tonight, which is relevant, at $7,000. It's not incredibly relevant, but the other guys playing the 1 and 2 do get some sort of cookie upgrade there. Rozier at only 6.8. I think that's interesting. Lamb at 6.6. Marvin at 6.4. Hernan Gomez at 5.8. Marcus Morris at only 5.6. Frank Kaminsky at 5.4. MKG at 5,000. Marked as questionable, will play. Malik Monk at 4,600. I like him a lot. Also marked as questionable. Cody Zeller at 4,200. Mikal Bridges at 3,800. Baines at 3,600. Biyombo at 34, Tony Parker at 32, and so on, Grant. So let me start at the bottom here and scroll up here and talk about guys I would have any interest in playing and give you a brief idea of how much I like them for 3 minutes until I have to abdicate the show. I will be back as soon as I can get the baseball guys off the air. 7:05, 7:07, 7:09. I'll come back on both formats and we'll check for any updated news, and we'll do this right up to the lock, answer questions, do anything else we can there. Robbie Williams is going to play at 2,600. He probably plays 12 minutes, but if you loved everyone else on your roster and needed that money, I don't have a problem with that. He's barely playable to me. I would probably rather look at other guys. I don't think I'm quite on Devonta Graham. Biyombo at 3,400 isn't really a fantasy up guy. Aaron Baines at 3,600 is not out of play. He's healthy. I expect him to see some time. That'd be just tournaments for me. Bridges at 3,800 I like. Zeller at 4,200 I really, really like. He's going to be popular because they did come out and say he's starting. So, like, in a tournament, I would rather play Hernan Gomez at 5,800 than Zeller at 4,200. Hernan Gomez can and did in Summer League and did last year at times play 18 minutes and get 29 fantasy points. That's a very real possibility, and he's going to be 40% owned, whatever Zeller is. Zeller is, I'm presuming, going to be the most popular value play on the board. Because, again, if you're a Boston guy and you're like, oh, I love Boston, if you're just a casual, you can absolutely play Zeller and Hernan Gomez together. Even if they were more expensive, you could. But those negative correlation things based on minutes don't really apply here when everyone needs so few and when they're both so cheap. Other guys, Bridges at 3,800 we mentioned. Malik Monk at 4,600 is an outstanding tournament play. He's going to play 18 to 21 minutes off the bench and shoot constantly, even if his pelvis is injured. You can Frank Kaminsky in a tournament. I don't think I would Marcus Morris at 5,800 off the bench in his role. I'd Marvin Williams if I was building 5 lineups. I'd have a Marvin in there somewhere. I'd Jeremy Lamb, although he also is going to be very popular. They're going to be the two most popular. I guess Kemba may end up there. But yeah, so there was the very briefest of takes. If you have any questions that I didn't get to on this show and you don't want to wait 2 hours and 15 minutes for me to return for the ladder show, favorite Celtic is probably Kyrie Irving because I think there are enough good, cheap Hornets that you can throw them in there and make that work. So, but non-Kyrie Celtics is a fair question. I will take that question before I go. I might like Hayward more than Kyrie. I certainly don't mind having both of them and thinking that, you know, they get some time and but Rozier would be up there for me too. Like, I like 20 minutes of Kyrie at the most at 10,600, but I prefer 20 minutes of Terry Rozier at 6,800. Like, he's not quite as good of a point per minute guy as Kyrie, but he's not a full 30 to 50% worse, depending on whether or not you're counting it up or counting it down. So, yeah, those would be my opinions there. So I will be back in 210, 215. Tweet me if you have any follow-up in the interim, and we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get it done.